Douglas Carswell used to be the Conservative MP for Clacton, the constituency that's now going to be seeing the name Nigel Farage on its ballot paper. Carswell was a Tory MP before he changed his political allegiance, joined UKIP in the summer of 2014, saying at the time he wanted to see a fundamental change in British politics. He's now the president and CEO of the Mississippi Centre for Public Policy. Very, very good to see you there, Douglas. First of all, your reaction to your old seat, Clacton, seeing Nigel Farage fighting for that, for the Reform Party.
I'm absolutely delighted. I mean, Clacton constituents, my former constituents, deserve to have a real choice rather than the Tweedledee, Tweedledum alternatives that they're being offered. You mentioned that when I, a decade ago, almost to the day, campaigned with Nigel in that Clacton by-election, I said Britain needed fundamental change in its politics. Sadly, we haven't seen that, and that is why Nigel is back in Clacton. We fundamentally have been let down by a system where you vote Conservative but end up with a Social Democratic Party in office.
Now, as a man who has been in both parties, well, I say UKIP, it's now Reform UK, but effectively both parties, what do you see about the dynamics of some kind of realignment of the right after the election? Because it's very difficult. These are people, by and large, who really dislike each other.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, the extent to which the Conservative Party institutionally failed to sort of absorb Nigel and Tyson and the rest of them. I mean, I think one of the problems the Conservative Party is dealing with, and no one likes to talk about it, but from the safety of America, I will. The Conservative Party has had decades of almost sort of diversity recruitment. And I think this means you've got a lot of third-rate mediocrities parachuted into safe seats. You've had a lot of people promoted in Westminster who are basically charlatans. You've got a cabinet full of third-raters. This means that institutionally, the Conservative Party as it currently stands has just not got the competence and the characters that are required to provide Conservative governance. And so at some point, if you want to have an alternative to the left, the Farage faction and the Conservative Party need to merge, rather similar to what happened in Canada a generation ago.
Well, I was going to ask you about Canada, actually, because what happened there, of course, was that a Conservative leader did very, very badly indeed. Things fell apart, and there was then a takeover from the outside, as it were. And I know Nigel Farage thinks a lot about this. Do you think it is possible the Conservative Party here will just vanish and be replaced by something else?
With luck. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Tice and Farage called Reform UK Reform, which was the name of the renegade, authentic party in Canada. I mean, I think you need to ask what the Conservative Party's biggest achievement has been to ensure that people vote Conservative, but end up with left-wing government, left-wing on energy, left-wing on taxes, left-wing on immigration. The left is firmly in control of our public institutions after 14 years of these chances. So, I mean, I think there needs to be a realignment. But you've got to take... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but I mean, Douglas, you were a Conservative for a very long time. I just wonder about your own sort of emotional feelings about the end of the Conservative Party. I don't want to get overexcited, but that is what some people are now predicting.
I mean, I left the Conservative Party a decade ago, and I've got lots of friends in the Conservative Party. I was ecstatic when Boris Johnson won that massive majority in 2019, but my goodness, they've squandered it. And fundamentally, no one has a right to exist. No company, no party has a right to carry on existing. If you don't do what your customers want, if you fail on area after area. I mean, I think the single biggest failure of the Conservative Party is probably actually lockdown. That's bankrupted the country. They had the opportunity to do a Swedish sensible alternative. They went full-blown socialist, and we're living with the consequences today. The Tory Party is living with the consequences today of putting people like Matt Hancock in positions of authority. So I don't really want to see a Conservative Party come out of this in any recognisable shape or form.
So let me ask you, the view from Mississippi about Clacton. Do you think that Nigel Farage will end up as the MP for your old seat?
It'll be touch and go. I mean, roughly as a good rule of thumb, they'll be polling double in Clacton what they're polling nationally. So if they're on 15% nationally, they'll be on about 30%. It's going to be nip and tuck. Nigel needs to get very granular. It needs to be very local. No bombast. He needs to be talking about the things that matter to people besides immigration. And if he can do that, he'll win. If he hasn't learned the lesson of the past 7 failures, I'm afraid this will be his 8th. But I wish him well. Clacton deserves to have a real credible alternative to Tweedledee and Tweedledum.